Hello, and welcome to another episode of The End of the Search. This one I call it, Is Life Really Miserable? And it's based on a comment somebody made, and the comment is, I am glad finally one dualist admitting, or I don't know if he meant to say one non-dualist admitting, it doesn't matter, but he says, I am glad finally one dualist admitting how the day-to-day experience of living is in fact miserable. And he puts in parentheses, or a prison, as you said. It's based on a video that I made. As much as the inner experience may be that of freedom. I was trying to point this fact out some comments ago when I said something like this: external life is miserable, while internal life can be happy. You replied to that comment saying that internal and external life is merely a dualistic distinction with which I do not agree at all, although I was grateful about the video reply. This is one of my greatest criticisms of non-duality, not admitting how brutal and miserable everyday life actually is. Buddhism points this basic and inescapable fact in their first noble truth: life is miserable. Okay, so the person made a comment before, and yes, I replied that way, and then I made a video about it in which I kind of explained, and I did point out that life experience, the experience of being a separate individual, of course, is a experience of scarcity. It's not an experience of pure joy and happiness, because again, when I feel separate from the rest, that's fear. But there's one distinction I wanted to make here, and it's this. When we're talking about life being miserable, okay, we're living an experience that is an experience or a seeming experience of separation. Consequently, that once again is the cause of all fear. However, this is what I was trying to point to. There is a way of living in this world of appearances with a mind that is not of it. In other words, you can live and you can have the experience of being in a body, but without the content of a mind that is identified with fear. That's what is meant by living in the world with a mind that is not of it. For example, was Buddha suffering? And Buddha was not suffering. He was at peace. Was Jesus suffering? No, he was at peace. They were happy. But they were not happy because they were a body, or they were experiencing themselves as bodies within the context of this illusion. They were happy because they did not believe the content of the mind. You see? So, when I point out here that internal and external life is merely a dualistic distinction, this is what I mean. Let's say you're sleeping and you're dreaming, and you believe that you're the character in the dream. You see? The character in the dream may seem to have an internal and an external. You see? But the truth of the matter is that the character in the dream doesn't have internal nor external, because the dream itself and the character is a projection from the mind, and the mind is non-dualistic. The mind has no internal or external. But in the dream, that is merely a dualistic distinction. So now, within this seeming dream, internal and external are just dualistic distinctions. But the truth, which is where we're pointing to, is beyond the duality, is beyond the distinctions. So, for example, right now, if you don't identify with the thoughts, if you don't believe the thoughts, which are the ones who evaluate as internal or external, what remains? You see? If you don't believe your thoughts, what remains is the peace that surpasses all understanding, and that is not miserable. And yet, you're still having the experience of being in a body. You see what I mean by that? So, again, the experience of being a separate entity is the cause of all fear. But if you don't believe the thoughts, then the fear is eradicated, and what remains is what is. And what is not evaluating between miserable or non-miserable. It's just simply what is. I'm going to give you an example. A couple of nights ago, the mind was having a field day. I don't know, maybe AC/DC was in concert and they were partying. I don't know, but I just know that the mind was just all over the place. I could not control it, nor I was trying to control it. But I was not feeling miserable. It was just part of what was happening. And I woke up, go to the kitchen, I see the clock is 3 o'clock in the morning. That's just a happening. Without the judgment, I wasn't suffering it. I wasn't feeling miserable. That's just another experience. That's when people ask me if I have problems, I have to be very conscious. How do I answer that question? I say, I don't have problems. I only have experiences. Without the judgment, the experience does not turn into a miserable or pleasurable experience or whatever. It's just that. And some experiences may seem to be, they have a different context than others. But if I don't label them, then it's not miserable or non-miserable. It's just simply life unfolding. But once again, the moment we begin to jump into how brutal and miserable everyday life actually is, that is a very miserable way of living. I mean, there's a lot of suffering there. But what if you know who you are? When we are recognizing the fact that I am, in spite of what the character may be doing, then life is not miserable or non-miserable. Life simply is. That's where I'm pointing to. You see? And this is what these videos are pointing to. And again, when you read, for example, Buddhism points basic, inescapable fact in their first noble truth, life is miserable, ask yourself, was Buddha suffering? Was Buddha feeling miserable? You see? He's pointing to the fact that when you transcend the content of the mind, then you're happy, you're free. See? And this is where this is all pointing to. Otherwise, again, if we get caught into this idea that life is miserable or something, then yeah, we'll experience that misery. You see? And in these videos, I am not denying our experience. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it either. Again, like trying to, life is happy and go, no. This life is a life of change. And you have, all sorts of emotions, sensations, and everything. But if you don't identify with the content of the mind, when you know who you are, life is lived but not suffered. And in that sense, life is not miserable. Life simply is, in spite of the textures, in spite of the colors, in spite of the sensations, in spite of the changes. Life is. And that's where these videos are pointing to. That's why I don't consider that life is miserable or anyway. No, I consider life just to be as it is. And if I never lose sight of who I am happy. I experience the peace that surpasses all understanding. And this is very practical. This is not esoteric. Again, let's not get caught up into concepts like, for example, Buddha says that life is miserable, and hang on to that belief. Because if you do, that's going to be your experience. You see? But if you're open to life as it unfolds, without believing what the mind is trying to tell you about life, then you cannot say that life is miserable, and you cannot say that it's non-miserable either. You simply live as a Buddha lived, with a smirk in his face, like a little smile. Why? Because he knew it was all a projection, it's all a dream, and who he is, who we are, who I am, the I am, so to speak, is in what he rested. We were resting, and that's the invitation that every single philosophy points to. When you look at the Bible, be still and know that I am God, is inviting you to a space where there's no misery, where there's just openness, where there's peace. In A Course in Miracles, there's a line that says, the miracle comes to the mind that submerges itself in quietude. I'll write it down here in the screen so you can see what I meant. In non-duality, if you want to use that term, well, again, non-duality, who would be talking about it? I mean, in reality, non-duality is the absence of everything perceivable, but within this context, they always point to silence. In silence, there's no misery. I don't mean silence in the sense of trying to stay quiet while the mind is going crazy. Silence means non-judgment is what I'm pointing to. When the mind can go crazy, like mine was going, 2 days ago, and I couldn't sleep until 3 o'clock in the morning, but it was not a suffering experience. It was just part of the play, and it may happen again. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is that I am. Rest in the I am, you see, and don't get caught in the concepts or anything like that, because once again, if you hold on to a strong belief that Buddha says that life is miserable, again, I'm not judging your assessment or anything. I'm just simply saying that if that's what you want to believe, that's going to be your experience. If on the other hand, you just simply rest in beingness and don't believe the content of the mind, you're happy, you see, in spite of what may be happening in the world of appearances. You're at peace. And in that sense, life is not miserable. Life simply is. And well, this is inspiration that came through. I hope it served. And as always, may peace permeate the mind so that love can become evident.